let's start. Before we start today's session as such, I think something that we have to talk about for you all to understand this entire work that we have been doing is to understand the concept of public archaeology. So if you will just highlight me and Mugdha ma'am with you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I thought you will take it at the end. No?
No, ma'am, we'll take it now only so that people understand the concept first.
Okay.
So what you have to understand is all the work that was being done by the Center for External Studies, especially in the field of archaeology, was a work in what we call public archaeology. So one of the great thrusts that we have had at CMS and subsequently at Institution is whose archaeology is it? Who are we doing this archaeology for? And everything that we have been doing in archaeology has been always keeping in mind the people around whom we are working and trying to understand the archaeology of the people and to try and understand it for the people. We're also trying to understand not necessarily the archaeology of a very large conceptual framework, but we're trying to understand archaeology in its microcosm. We're trying to understand archaeology in the more rural areas. We're trying to understand archaeology and its relationship and the relationship of the people who live there with the sites in which they live. So this was the background with which we at CMS and now at Institution approached all of our archaeological work. Ma'am?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did was there was an enormous amount of outreach being continuously done, not just to the people where we worked, but also to people where we came back. And the idea was to spread the word via the projects we were doing and to talk about what kind of archaeology we were doing. So there was an enormous amount of toing and froing with schools and colleges, organizing public lectures, and creating a concept called Archaeology Day, which then went on to become a much, much larger concept where archaeology, geology, mineralogy, and various things were added year after year into an event that started as a one-day event and it ended up becoming a 4-day extravaganza. We also added a number of conferences, an annual conference, we added an annual workshop on explorations. And the idea at all times was to spread the word in archaeology and to realize that we were doing archaeology for the people, that there was a huge lacunae in archaeology. And the reason that archaeology did not get its due was essentially because the people did not know what archaeologists did. Archaeology is not perceived as a subject by most people. Most people have no clue that there is such a thing as archaeology. The number of times archaeologists are introduced as, they are doing something that architecture or some anthropology or something. And the reason for this is not the illiteracy of the people due to only their own fault, but is also to a large extent something that happens because there is no work done by archaeologists in getting their message across. So archaeologists have been very lax in, telling people what archaeology is and doing that kind of archaeology. So that has been our thrust, and it is through that we ended up excavating the site of Chandore. And perhaps that might not be the best reason for a lot of people. But in problem-oriented archaeology, the only problem is not the site. The problem can also be archaeology. And this is something that we very seriously addressed at the excavations at Chandore. Ma'am?
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, you would remember, Kurush, when we had our field trips, I always noticed that people around the monuments or the preserved archaeological sites weren't very friendly with the sites. As I recollect very distinctly at Usmanabad, when we had gone to see the temple of Vamana. the that
Trivikrama temple.
Trivikrama temple. People were absolutely, they were interested in the puja and everything, but they did not like the fact that this whole thing was preserved by ASI. They were not very happy about it. They said ये आर्कियोलॉजी वाले आते हैं और फिर वो पूरा बंद कर देते हैं, यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं कर सकते वगैरह वगैरह. So that kind of enmity was also seen at the place where we had gone initially. In Chandore, when we went first as a visit, exploration, we talked to people. So their doubt was this, that archaeology people will come and then stop every activity, all activity in this region. And first of all, they did not understand. They were not friendly with the concept archaeology. They were so like, what are you going to do? How is it going to help our village? So, helping my village, if you find a site, that was a very important thing for them. And I think me, Kurush, Dhananjay Karni, and some local teachers, we got together, we talked to them. In 3 or 4 visits prior to the actual excavation, we went there, we had chai with them, we explained them so many things about archaeology, how the site could be excavated, how important. Of course, their interest was, they wanted to create a temple out of this. So in fact, we told them, yes, if we really find something, we could create a museum or we could do something for the village. How you can make use of this whole archaeological site. Well, nothing much came out of it, but at least we could ensure that they felt part of it. They felt that this is something important. Something important has been found in their village and they should be part of it. So that really made a change. Like, on the first day when we decided, okay, now this what Kurush was saying, that it will take at least 4 to 7 days just to clear this area. The brush and everything that was growing on that side, it will take at least 5 days to 7 days. And then we suddenly saw so many people coming in with their pauris and kudlis and everything. And they said the Mr. Shinde was their kind of leader. He was a police party. And he said, Madam, you don't worry. Sahib, तुम्ही काय काळजी करू नका. हे सगळं तुम्हाला साफ करून आम्ही देतो. And around 80 people, they were at the site and they started clearing everything, the dry brush and whatever was lying, kachra, kuda, everything. And we were like, they insisted, ek naral foduya. Well, and the naral was given and the prasad was distributed. We had carried some sweets, I guess. And we distributed that. And after that, within 1 day and a half, maybe, everything was clear. And they carried the debris and the sukha kachra, everything away. It was just, such a pride for them. And that day, nobody expected anything else. Like afterwards, when we hired people, we paid them wages. And mind you, we paid equal wages to men and women. The tradition was to give less wages to women, but they were slightly unhappy. The men were slightly unhappy and said, no, but this is wrong. You see, they are going to work as much as you and they will get the equal wages. But on the first day, the point is that on the first day, nobody expected anything from us. In fact, they allowed us chai and everything. Somebody brought chai. Everybody was given a cup of tea. So that kind of bonhomie was created. And Kurush was, of course, largely part of it. He was such an endearing fellow there. वो बाबाजी सर नहीं आएंगे क्या आज? That was always the question. आएंगे वो इधर ही रहते हैं. So the full cooperation was given, and it was because as an archaeologist, Kurush did not sit in his ivory tower. Of course, he had done the same thing in Sanjan, as you know from tomorrow's lecture. But he was always mixing with them, chatting with them, explaining them the things about the local history, what would have happened at Masara, and what would have happened at other close by sites. So, the whole thing was communicating with people. And that's what we did at Chandore. We had 4 seasons of exploration and excavation, right? 3.
4.
So All this while we got a total cooperation from them, and it was a very happy experience. I wish we could do more for Chandore.
True, very true. You see, what had happened was we had attempted, the department had attempted to do something a year prior to my joining. And sadly for us, the local people of that village created an enormous amount of hindrance in the entire project. And this strengthened our resolve to make sure that we would not go into the village to do any work as such, any digging, any clearance, anything, till we had completely gained the confidence of the villagers. So in total, we made, I think, 5 or 6 trips to Chandore. We had an entire Gram Sabha, and we had Dr. Jamkedkar address the Gram Sabha, you know, before we actually,
was also there.
before we actually kicked off the entire process.
Mm.
So that made a lot of difference. So the confidence building measures, we weren't just a bunch of people who came with permission from the government, excavated on, open government ground and went away. At the most, paying a few laborers for their labor. We invested time in the village. And one of the most interesting things that happened was in the first season, they gave us a house, on the house as such, to stay in. And every evening, the village elders would come and sit with me after excavations to ask what had happened and why that was important, what had been found, what were the results thereof. And I had to tell them that every day there isn't often something to tell. But they said, never mind, we'll still come and sit with you because we want to hear what. So then I talked to them about archaeology in general and about the Konkan. And this again went a long distance towards getting the kind of data we wanted out of them, which you will see in the presentation today. So with that, I'm very sorry for being a little late, ladies and gentlemen, but there was some major issue with my listing. So I think we will start with sharing the screen. So what we're going to talk about today are the medieval excavations in the site of Chandore. The site of Chandore lies in the Mangaon Taluka of the Raigad district of Maharashtra. And the site is about 120 kilometers south of Mumbai. And it is just off the very, very busy, it's about 20 kilometers off the very busy Bombay-Goa highway. The thing that you've got to understand about archaeology is that very properly when we talk about archaeology and we talk about archaeological explorations and excavations, we always say that archaeologists conduct in-depth excavations after conducting very, very intensive explorations in an area. Now, to some extent, this is true, and to some extent, this isn't. In a perfect world, archaeologists would not do any excavations unless they had done a lot of explorations in the area before. But we ended up doing excavations at Chandore with very little excavation. The other thing you've got to understand is that the way archaeologists see a site is not necessarily the way we have lay people seeing a site. Lay people often think things are of great Puratan Kam, as they call it, and great ancient antiquity, as they call it, without really realizing that these things may be very recent, and 50 or 100-year-old things don't really excite archaeologists that much because that is not what they're looking for. So we got a call from Mrs. Kunda Chitri of Badgar Bhatejiwadi one day, and she said, she's Mr. Dhananjay Karnik, our Institution Managing Trustee's aunt. And she called up Mrs. Karnik and said, I've heard that you're doing this archaeology at the Center for Extramural Studies. And there is some amazingly ancient stuff at a village next to where I live. You must come and see it. Now, this kind of thing happens on an amazingly regular basis. 9 out of 10 times, unless the person saying this has some archaeological historical background, this is a bum call, as we call it. Okay? But you have to go every single time because 1 out of 10 times is the jackpot. And this was 1 out of 10 such times. So we went down to this little village called Chandore, and we went to a locality known as Chand Surya Che Devi, the temples of the moon and sun. And what completely blew us away was a very, very odd set of ruins with what is called a step well. So we had a step well there, which is basically in this case a very simple step well, not something like the Rani Ki Vav that you would get. And it's a very large square tank which has steps going down to it. Now, these are very common in the Konkan and are called Ghode Vav. And there is an amazing story attached to it. The story is that all of these are built by Shivaji Maharaj. They were all built for his couriers. Yes, that's the word that is locally used, his couriers. And his couriers would deliver messages to him across the length and breadth of Maharashtra and his domains to Raigad. All roads lead to Raigad in the Konkan. And the story would then say that his couriers were so dedicated that they'd be waiting on horseback for the courier from the last station to come. They would grab the packet of letters and without stopping would deliver it to the next stop. If on the way they required to drink water for their horses, these wells had been built where they could ride their horses into the water and then immediately turn around and give their horses water without even getting off or breaking their speed, and then ride off again towards Raigad. Anybody who has a horse knows that you can't really take it downstairs. You also know that in an area which is perennially short of water in summer, if you put your horse into the water, the villagers will probably lynch you. And thirdly, and most importantly, you cannot take a horse to water without getting off and loosening the kinch in your saddle. Otherwise, the horse will not be able to drink. These are, of course, stories. These are beautiful apocryphal stories. And these myths are created essentially by people who do not have horses, number one, and who have something enigmatic in their backyard and don't really know how to explain it. In our case, what was very interesting was on the staircase leading down into the tank, and this is the only one that I know of so far, there were two niches that were cut onto the side wall. And in one of them was a beautiful Shilara Yadava style image of a seated Haragauri. And this immediately told us that this tank would at least have to belong to the 13th century AD, if not a little earlier. And that therefore, this changed our way of looking at Ghodevas per se. And it changed our way of looking at this locality where there were a large number of hero stones, Sati stones, and other such objects scattered over the landscape. At the CAMS, we had been running a very, very successful course in archaeology, a certificate course, and our students would be sent for a 2 or 3 day short stint to the Deccan College excavations. We would have liked to take them for at least an 8-day span, but Deccan College was being sweet enough to us to let our students come, and we could only impose on them so much. After we went to this locality and saw this, we came back, and I still remember, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, and we were having coffee together, ma'am and I. And I said, ma'am, this would be a great place to do a small scale excavation. And we could train our students here, and we could do a lot of public archaeology. And this is a region of the coast where no archaeology has been done. And it would give us a very good idea and understanding what there is on the ground over here. This was purely kinetic history on my part. And I was still young, and I didn't know Mrs. Karnik well enough, because almost a moment after I completed my sentence, she said, "How much will it cost?" And I said, "What?" She said, "No, the excavation, how much will it cost?" And I hadn't been in the field for at least 6 or 7 years before that. And I said, minimum 50,000 rupees at least we would need. She said, "Okay, you start planning. I'll start seeing how I can raise the funds." And it was that simple. That is how we decided. We realized it was already the month of May. We quickly put together a proposal and sent it to the ASI and the State Department. We got permission to excavate, and the excavation at Chandore took place. So this is the location of the site of Chandore. Look at it very carefully. This is Murud Janjira over here. This is Dighi. This is Diveagar, and this is the port of Masla, which belongs to the Siddhis era. So this is basically the Siddhis domain over here. And this is the highway. So there's Indapur, Mangaon, and Goregaon, and going down to Mahad. And from Mangaon is the road that goes via Morba and ends up at Chandore over here on the way to Masla and then to Srivardhan. So this is an important axis. And the older days, the axis was from Goregaon to Chandore. This road no longer really exists in any good fashion. But the original road was from Chandore to Vadgar, Vadgar Bhatejiwadi, and Goregaon. And this was the main road in those days, in the medieval period, which went past the spine of the Western Ghats. This is Nizampur, from where everybody heads off towards Raigad normally. So this is the location of our site. And we wondered why there was a very interesting and intriguing site over here with what looked like the plan of a square temple. Now, there is no direct epigraphical mention of the site at all. What is very interesting is the word Chandor. Chandor, Chandor, Chandore, Chandor invariably is an upperbrownshire of the word Chandrapur or Chandranagar. And Chandranagar, we have noticed, is usually a site that is in some way or the other related to important royalty and such like in the medieval era. And there are a number of sites with a similar name like this, which were used either as territorial headquarters or as capital cities, as in the case of Chandor in Goa. While perusing the gazetteers, which one does in archaeology, one always makes sure after perusing the current gazetteer to peruse the older gazetteer. And in the Colaba District Gazetteer, the new gazetteer sadly has no mention of the site. The Colaba District Gazetteer talks about a small entry of 3 lines saying that there are some ruins at the site of Chandor. This is the only mention that we had before moving there. Now, the oral traditions in the area assign the temples to the Dongar Kolis and the tank, as I told you, to Shivaji Maharaj. The team has carried out 4 seasons of small-scale excavations. Our excavations were never very large. We never had a budget for large excavations. I still remember in the first season, I kind of overran the budget of 50,000 to 56,000. And when I presented my accounts to Mrs. Karnik, when I came back, Dr. Karnik looked at me and said, Kurush, where are we going to get the 6,000 from? You have to understand that you're now working with the university. And if we don't have sanction for something, we can't really spend that money. So luckily, we did get money through some other way, and she did reimburse me for that 6,000 rupees that we had spent. But this is where I learned some very important lessons. So the Center for Extramural Studies and Institution jointly excavated from 2012 to 2015. In 2011, we carried out the first preliminary investigations. We had 3 main goals: to investigate the very interesting spread of temple, tank, and scattered sculptural members and memorial stones, to train the students of the Center for Extramural Studies in excavation and exploration techniques, and to establish the archaeological credentials of the University of Mumbai and the India Study Center. Now, this is very, very important. I'm telling you why this is important. In the 155-year history at that point, it's 10 years more since, the University of Mumbai had never undertaken an archaeological excavation. It was a matter of great sorrow to me, not a matter of great pride that the first excavations actually took place after 155 years. So the idea was to try and establish our credentials towards establishing a department ultimately someday of archaeology at the University of Mumbai, and for the India Study Center also to start establishing its own credentials in archaeology. So the story actually, as I said, of the India Study Center starts in 2011 and is a story that has been continuing all the way to 2021. So we were completely blown away by the kind of data that we had, and the sheer wealth of data that came out of the site totally changed the way we are looking at the archaeology of this region. So there are clearly 2 separate temple complexes that we know of now, and a modern temple complex. So the older ones are designated Temple Complex 1 and 2. We also found in the 4th season an ancient Bene Israeli cemetery on the mound designated CDRBI, with a total of 70 adult, sub-adult, and child graves. And we also saw the team excavating outside the periphery of the site at a location we called CDRN, or the Nala section, discovering the prehistoric past of the site in microliths, microlithic debitage, as well as limonite-covered nodules of chalcedony, which was why the Mesolithic peoples were coming here and using the site, because it was a very important raw material site. So we cleared the prints, and this is what the layout of the site of Chandor is. But this is the modern village of Chandor over here. This is the upper class village, as it's called, made up of the Marathas, the Kundis, and a few of the different Vaishyavani, as they're called, who are basically the cotton merchants, the oil pressers, so on and so forth. This is over here a very interesting Chambar locality and a Mahar locality that are squeezed together into this area over here. And we have a small Adivasi Pada further to the right or further to the east. Straight across this land over here, which is a large bowl. So this is a hillside that you see over here. And there's a large bowl in front of you, which is full of paddy fields. There is one large man-made tank over here. There is another man-made tank over here. There is a rock-cut step well over here. There is a beautiful plinth. This is the rock-cut step well. There is a Nandi and a plinth over here of Temple 1. There is the beautiful cemetery over here of the later period. And as I told you, there is the Bene Israeli cemetery on this mound over here. And of course, there are various hero stones and other plinths. And this is Temple Complex 2. So Temple Complex 1 looks like this. There is a massive stone temple built of laterite rocks. These are very unevenly sized laterite rocks. They're very beautifully dressed on the outside, but there is no one uniform size. Once again, talking about the antiquity of the site, because large chunks of laterite would have been dug out and would have been shaped as they were to maximize the size. We took our trenches over here, so we gridded the entire site. Over here is the tank. This is the beautiful rock-cut tank that we have over here, and the stairs going down into our step well. And these are the two niches over here, and this is the niche in which we found that beautiful Haragauri image. On top over here is a Shaivite shrine, a Shiva temple, and there is a Nandi Mandapa which is completely askew because of a large tree growing in it, with a very, very weathered Nandi still sitting in it. So this was the tank. This was the entrance for the temple over here. This was the entrance for the temple plinth over here. This was, as you knew, a Shaivite temple. So if we had a smaller Shaivite temple here, the larger temple would very logically be a mother goddess shrine of some sort. Interestingly, there was also surviving a small, very, very small fragment of a border wall that originally bordered the entire complex, and a gateway over here with a beautiful balustrade on one side. Sadly, the other side balustrade had been dug out by the local PWD to fill a hole in the road which runs parallel to the site. So we conducted very, very small excavations here in the first season, and we opened up these two quadrants of a 5 meter by 5 meter trench. So we had a 5 meter by 2.5 meter area over here in trench D7. So this is the excavation that we conducted. We found a small retaining wall. The bedrock was very, very close to the surface. There was a very, very small area in which we could actually conduct excavations. The total depth of the excavations over here was barely 30 centimeters. And from this 30 centimeters, much to our joy, we found a beautiful Gadhia coin that you see over here. And we also found some very, very tiny fragments of glazed ware. One fragment of turquoise glazed ware and 2 or 3 fragments of monochrome glazed ware were also found in the vicinity. And this is the plinth that you see on top over here. This is the entrance to the plinth. This is the close-up of the entrance to the plinth. We subsequently excavated it. And of course, we have the walls that we exposed over here. We then went on to extend our trenches in subsequent seasons, and we exposed the entire construction of the site, and we exposed what was left of the stairwell, and we found a beautiful intact pot buried over here at the foot of the stairs. This was on the top left. Luckily, we had a picture from Explorations. As ma'am told you, about 80 people descended on the site and decided to clean out the site for us. And they went through the site like a proverbial hot knife through butter. In a matter of 4.5 hours, what you see on the top left looked like the bottom left. This is what they did in just 4.5 hours. So we also, since this was also part of the grid, we also carefully cleaned out all the debris. So this was a massive slope, as you see, going down into the tank. You can see the 2 niches over here. And we started systematically clearing out the steps and sieving through everything that we collected, since this was all material from the site, which had slowly fallen in and was swept in by the rains. We found a beautiful ring shard of a blue glazed-ware bowl from the second or third step over here. All of these steps are rock cut. Only the top step is made out of masonry. This is the temple that exists on top, and this is the Garbhagriha of the temple. You can see Dr. Abhijit Dandekar here and Dr. Neha Dhavle and Ruta Wagmare, all of them over here excavating at the site with us. This is the Garbhagriha that we emptied out. And if you look on the right-hand side, this is what the Garbhagriha actually looked like before we emptied it out. There's a beautiful weathered Ganesha image lying over here. And this was built on top of the area parallel to the staircase going down inside. So we excavated the entire area once again going through it. What we realized was that there was beautifully well built inside. Sadly, most of the flooring had been dug out and taken away, but only the flooring under the Garbhagriha had survived. And there were 4 beautiful pillar bases over here, 4 pillars, wooden pillars that would have been erected above the Garbhagriha. There are steps going in, and this was a slightly subterranean as such Garbhagriha below the level of the floor. And this is only seen in the case of Shiva temples. And lying on the site, some distance away, we found a beautiful broken shivling fragment. This is a very, very large shivling fragment. And so this is about 60 centimeters this way. So very large shivling would have originally sat where this tree was. And there is a beautiful pranala over here going out into the next, across the field, into the field over here. So this is the beautiful image of Hara Gauri. This is Neha again cleaning it out. We thought this was Uma Maheshwara, but after cleaning the image very carefully, we noticed that over here, instead of the lion, we have a beautiful horpad, a beautiful monitor lizard, and that changes this from being an Uma Maheshwara into a Hara Gauri image. So this is then Gauri. And this is again very typical of this region. We have a Ganesha here over Parvati's or Gauri's head. We have a beautiful Kartikeya over here on a peacock. And of course, we have Shiva with his Damru, his snake, and Nandi, on which both of them are sitting. She, of course, is sitting on his lap. We started working inside the tank because we realized that the maximum debris that we would find would be inside the tank itself, in the hope of finding most of the swept away debris. The first thing we came across was a beautiful step cut into the tank. So if you notice over here, the tank is not just one vertical structure, but there was a beautiful step here. So we cleared out an area and we started digging in, and we found debris that had fallen in. Large amount of debris, definitely belonging to a temple that we were exposing, and of course the other shrine that we were exposing, telling us from which direction the debris was falling down. We then came across a second step over here. So this was very painstaking and very laborious work. Finally, in the corner, so this is the first step, and this bottle here is sitting in a depression that was meant to hold small pots. This is the second step, and this is 2 steps from an angle over here. And within the well itself, this is the entire well on the right-hand side, after we had exposed it completely. We found a well within the well. This was a very, very weird situation. And we went down here, and we only excavated in the months of May, April and May every year. And we systematically went down here in this temple, in this well within a well. The smaller well inside was built at a later point after a large portion of the tank had already been filled in naturally. And the tank was opened up for reuse. And when this was done, masonry from the surrounding structures was used to build 2 retaining walls against a small corner of the tank. So instead of opening up the entire tank, only one small corner had been opened up. So we, of course, went on and exposed the same corner. And much to our surprise, we actually hit water on the 29th of May. So this was at the height of the dry season. And we hit water over here. So it was very, very difficult going through this and emptying out the entire tank. This is the well after we have removed all the debris and we have reached bedrock. There were 2 beautiful streams pumping into it as soon as we could empty it out. and there is roughly about 45 to 50 centimeters deep. We calculated that 1200 liters of water fit into this tank at any given time before it stops rising. And then we need to remove that water before it fills again. It fills within 3 hours. So that's 1200 liters every 3 hours at the end of May. And much to our surprise, 24 hours after we finished excavation on the 1st of June, we had a massive thunderstorm and the lights were cut. And for the next 3 days, there was no water or electricity. And the villagers were actually starting to reuse this well. Of course, the murkiness had gone down because the mud, the fine sediment had settled down. And when they were reusing the well, it was a beautiful moment to see a medieval well being reused by the laborers. So this is the step well now, having cleared the steps. This is showing you the little well within, and this is to show you the level of the water inside the well. This was taken in a matter of minutes. We had water coming out from this large crack over here in 2 different locations to fill this up. This is that beautifully made spot to keep your ghada over here, the one that you see over here that has been carved out. And right at the end, in the last bit of gar, as it's called, which is what collects the very sticky, fine aeolian deposit that collects after settling in the bottom of a tank, we found a beautiful coin. So this helped us to actually date the tank itself. I'm very, very grateful to my friend, Dr. Mahesh Kabra, for this. This is a coin of Murtuza Nizam Shah and is dated 1556 to 1588. And this was found in virtually the last dig, right at the bottom of the tank, as though it was waiting for us. So this is the Nandi Mandapa, which has been very badly disturbed by this tree over here. This is the Nandi, again, stylistically very much in the Shilara Yadava style. Lying in front are these 2 sati stones, a fragment of a sculpture of some sort, and part of a double sati, a twin sati pillar over here. So we found the second part of the twin sati pillar on the site also, and this that you see on the left is a beautiful twin sati pillar. And this is the hero and his 2 wives, and these are the 2 wives ascending to heaven after immolating themselves over here on his corpse, and this is the wood that is piled up front. This is the typical raised right hand of the sati shown over here. 2 different sati stones showing economic variation in the finesse that is done here. In both cases, the sati with a hand raised on the body of her husband, giving blessings on horseback as she rides to heaven. Here you can actually see 2 individuals. Here, of course, she's just blessing what look like 2 bags. And this is her united with her husband in heaven. And heaven is, of course, this beautiful shivling that is over here. In this case, this is the Mangala Kalasha. This was one of the most interesting discoveries of the excavation. This was part of a very, very ornate late Chalukyan style Shilahara era hero stone that was discovered on the site. And this was found just towards the corner of the tank. So when we started working here, and as I told you, we kept talking to the villagers and telling them about the location, and they would keep coming to see what they were doing, and we keep engaging with them as part of our public archaeology project. One 80-year-old gentleman came down here and said, you know, he pointed out to the base of the tank and a little ahead into the next field and said, Tikde Dev Ahe, there is God there. So we said, really? And he said, yes, as a child, I used to go. There was a small path, a pathway, a paivat as it's called. There were no roads as such, modern roads in those days. And we used to take the paivat down from here. And my mother used to always tell me to turn towards the Dev and to fold my hands. So we immediately hopped across the fence, and just this little bit on top over here was actually visible. We quickly dug around it, and we found the top 2 of what would have been at least 4, if not 5 tiers of a beautiful, elaborate hero stone. There's my wife Ria actually systematically removing the soil from within it. This is what we have, and this is the most interesting part of that hero stone. So the top panel, of course, is always the hero with a shivling, showing that he has ascended to Kailash. This panel shows the hero's death in battle. And in this battle scene where this is a battle going on, if you notice, this is the hero on horseback over here. So this is a narrative panel. And there is a beautiful umbrella above the hero. Now, these umbrellas are only carried above royalty. So telling us that some very, very important persona died at Chandore, okay? And that the hero stone was erected to his memory. We already have a twin Sati stone and two other Sati stones, telling us that definitely this area was seeing a large amount of battle and warfare. 100 meters across from the site of Temple Complex 1, we have Temple Complex 2. The plinth here is more carefully built. Interestingly, it has a off-center staircase and a beautifully made pathway. Two fragments of the Bali Pitha, the sacrificial altar, are lying over here where sacrifices are made. And this is very, very well made ashlar masonry. And where we cleared the masonry on the sides, you can see beautiful decorations. And it's made completely out of laterite blocks. And these are all evenly cut to one size, unlike Temple Complex 1. Next door to it, we excavated a massive plinth. This is the temple in the back, which you can see over here. And this is the massive plinth that we excavated. It was going to rain that day, and we quickly covered it in plastic sheeting. We excavated this plinth. This plinth had been built on a slope. And very, very interestingly for us, what they had done was they'd utilized the slope. So we have 4 courses visible over here and only 1 course visible at the back. So beautifully, this Sabha Mandapa had been created slightly separate from the main temple itself. This is the layout. So this is the sunken temple. Here, the entire temple is sunken over here. This is the 2 pieces of the Bali Pitha that I spoke about. This is the staircase going up. This is the temple plinth. These are the stairs going down to the temple. This is the beautiful platform that we have, or plinth that we have on top, the Sabha Mandapa. And this was a small mandapa that we found over here, which according to living memory was a Lata Mandapa. And a Lata Mandapa is where a large pillar is raised. So we by now we had in 3 years when we excavated Temple Complex 2, really gained the confidence of the local people. And they told us that it was only about 70 years ago that this temple fell into disuse, and that the entire series of temples was shifted from here to the modern village of Chandore. And that this was a temple of 3 goddesses, 3 sister goddesses, very, very local folk goddesses called Nolai, Zolai, and Bagzai. Most interesting out of this perhaps is the goddess Zolai. Zolai is always shown as an icon of Mahishasur Mardini. She is not recognized as Mahishasur Mardini. She does not belong to the greater tradition. But the memory of the greater tradition continues. And Zolai is very much shaped like Mahishasur Mardini. And we have a broken image found right here at the side of the site, before the site was moved. All animal sacrifice is now officially banned. But before any important event in the life of the villagers at Chandore, the male elders of the family will come here to this spot even today and sacrifice at least 1 chicken to the goddesses, because this is where the sacrifice to the goddesses is made, and not at the modern, more sattvic version of the temple. Adjacent to this temple, we found this massive hero stone with beautiful pilasters over here. And again, the hero in heaven, Gandharva couples shown in the sky above, the hero and his wife with garlands, the hero over here offering worship. This is the hero offering worship to the Shivlinga. We found yet another hero stone. This was found by Rajesh Pujari, and this is Andre over here exposing the stone. We have the remains of a beautiful Gajalakshmi image. So I know this is a little difficult for the uninitiated, but this is an elephant over here. These are the 4 legs of an elephant. This is the trunk of the elephant holding a gadha. This is the second gadha and the trunk of the second elephant. And this is the Gajalakshmi seated over here. This is the section at the river bank that we took. And you see the laminated clays and the laminated gravels of a typical river section of a very high fluvial environment in this area. And we actually washed and then sorted every single batch of soil that we took out from here. This is 2 meters by 1 meter. And Harshada Virkod, who was with me, very, very carefully excavated every single dig from here. In the top few layers, still about here, we got some scattered potsherds. But from here onwards, it was just purely stone tools, stone tool making debris, and limonitic nodules of chert, which would have been the raw material that was exploited at the site. So this is when we went back to plinth number 1 of temple complex 2. We first removed all the growth, and this is what it looked like. There was a lot of collapsed debris on both sides from the staircase, and a lot of collapsed debris of the roof tiles. So we very carefully excavated this section here after clearing this entire area. So we cleared the top, we cleared the sides, we understood how the layout was, and we cleared the entire, there was a small platform, a Pradakshina Patha running around it. So you can see the Pradakshina Patha more clearly over here. These stones, this is not a design, these stones have been lost as such. You can see the decoration continuing over here that we saw on top over here. So the same theme, and embedded right here in the floor, we found a beautiful coin from 1946. Right here, a beautiful coin with George on it from 1946. This is Chandore, the Ben Israeli mound. This was the Mahar Talav, and the debris from the making of the Mahar Talav was not lost to us like the Raj Talav on the other side because of the cemetery that sat on it. We had no clue what cemetery we were looking at. We carefully removed all the grass and all the and systematically plotted the cemetery. All the graves are in an east-west direction. Okay, and few of them have header and footer stones, as they're called. Okay, they're all narrow graves, simply made of stone, boat-shaped graves. And our first thought was that they were most probably Muslim graves. But there is a very separate Muslim village that exists about 4 kilometers away. And it has always been that way in the history of this region. And we were very perplexed as to what this was. And the same 80-year-old gentleman who had told us about Dev at the foot of our tank, we decided to go and ask him about it. And he looked at us very peculiarly as though, oh, everybody knows what that is. And I said, telling him, no, everybody doesn't, because everybody that we've asked in the village can't seem to place what this is or whose burial it is. It is just a place that nobody goes to. And he said, Tetar telinsa mashmoda ahe. So I had never come across the word mashmoda before, but the word teli is a very commonly known word for oil pressers. And in this area of Raigad, the oil pressers are the Bene Israelis, who claim to be descendants of a shipwreck that took place roughly 2,200 years ago off the coast of Nagaon near Alibag. And 7 men and 7 women survived, and the descendants of these people are the Bene Israelis. I mean, that's a lecture by itself. But he told me very clearly that, oh, no, there were Telis who lived in our village. And you see, the original family of Telis who lived in our village had their burials here. Then after they left in the 1940s, in 1948, they left for Israel. But the next village has Telis, and they sent one son over to live here. But since his family was from the next village, all of those in his family, all the deaths, everybody was buried back in their family cemetery. So this cemetery actually belongs to the original Chandorkar Telis, who lived in the village of Chandor, the Bene Israelis. And we have over 70 graves over here. If there was only one household, as we are told there was officially, then we are looking at perhaps a couple of 100 years, if not much more. I would say 300 to 400 years of burials of the Bene Israeli at this site. And this would be one of the oldest known Bene Israeli burial sites after the one at Naga. And this was a hitherto unknown Bene Israeli mound. As I told you, we found some very beautiful stone tools, and you can see some of the stone tool making debris on the right-hand side. You can see the beautiful fluted cores over here that we have, rather crude fluted cores, very typical of the Mesolithic period, large chunks showing signs of flaking, smaller chunks and flaked objects. We also have a large number of Bahmani glass bangles. So these are typical flat glass bangles which are made up of multiple layers of glass. They are normally worn in alternates between smaller glass bangles, so they, form a beautiful high-low, high-low, high-low profile on your hands. So we have these beautiful Bahmani glass bangles from the side. We have so giving us a range, if you want to look at it, of something like 20,000 years, 12,000 to 15,000 years ago for the Mesolithic tools at least, if not earlier, and 1600 AD for the Bahmani glass bangles on the other hand. We also got, as I told you, some very, very interesting ceramics, though in very fragmentary form. We have the monochrome glazed ware, which is, we believe, from Khambat, but we've just been told very recently probably comes from Burma. We're still trying to figure out what ramifications that has. We have the Celadon ware, and we have the Ming Dynasty porcelain over here, the blue and white porcelain. So, though compared to Sanjan, the sheer volume of data is much smaller of West Asian ceramics and Chinese ceramics, there is still a decent amount of it telling us that there was some kind of trade happening even in the later periods in this region. What we've realized is that this is the site of Divyagar, which we've been to, and from Divyagar to Masla, from Masla to Chandore, and then either to Goregaon or to Mandgaon to meet the highway over here, is a trade route. Masla and Chandore share a very interesting relationship. Masla was an important port of the medieval period. And what we do know about the port of Masla is that it is exactly 1 day from Chandore to go to Masla and come back by bullock cart. There is a very, very steep ghat section over here, and it takes a full day to take loaded bullock carts down to Masla and back traditionally. So it is usually at 1 day's running that you will have important way stations on a trade route. So if Goregaon, which was again a very important medieval town, Mandgaon of course was built much later, was a very important town, then the run from Goregaon to Chandore took 1 day, 20 kilometers. Again, there are 2 ghats that have to be covered. One at a place called Ghodeghoom. So the village of Ghodeghoom is known as Ghodeghoom. It lies roughly about over here because horses would refuse to go up the ghat and would want to turn around because it was very steep. So this again is a 1 day run of about 20 kilometers through the ghat region. And this is close to 10 kilometers to Masla and back. So telling you that if from Goregaon the traders were coming, this was the first night's halt. Then down to Masla, empty your load, pack your load again, and come back to Chandore, and from Chandore to Goregaon. So this was a very important way station on a trade route. It was also connected to the very important early medieval and later medieval port of Divyagar. There is also the ruins of a massive temple complex of this period at Tale over here. And we also now have a medieval site over here in this small arm of the creek, the site of Mandad. So all of these sites were deeply linked together. Now, as though all that wasn't enough, we found a brand new, at least we are calling it a brand new type of stone stele, which we fully identified at the site. It's something that is known before, but was not considered to be different. It's called the Gai Vasru pillar. So when Mrs. Chitre showed us the site, she also showed us very close to a house, this stele with a cow on it, a calf suckling, some kind of a stump in front, a sun and moon, and very weathered kalasha on top of it. So this is the Gai Vasru at the site of Vadgar Mudre. And we found that this was very interesting. We also then later found a similar one outside temple complex too. When we were talking to the locals, they said, by the way, there's another one very close in the Maharwadi. So we had 3. Then I sat down with 5 or 6 people from the village and spoke to them about these, showed them what I was looking at. And they said, there's one at Nalefodi in my friend's field. We went and met the friend and he said, no, there are 2 at Nalefodi. Nalefodi is a village just next door, and it's part of the group Gram Panchayat that makes up makes up Chandore. And then we found out that there was one behind the modern settlement. We found there was one on the ridge. And before we finished, there were 7 different Gaivastru stelae scattered around our site. And it made no sense whatsoever. Some of them are very well made, like this one that you see, where there are these 2 pilasters. There's actually this little bonnet over here and a similar bonnet on the shivling. And this has a second, this thing cut. And there is a bearded man with a top knot offering worship. And there is a man holding a kamandalu, like a priest behind him. So we were deeply, interested in these. And there's always the sun and moon symbol over here. You see the moon and the sun over here also. This is the one in front of the Chandore Temple Complex 2, plinth. Okay. This is the one at Baudwadi, very close by, about 200 meters away. And you see that here the sun and the moon are just very simple lines, crescent and a circle in single line form. And the cow is actually bending down to lick the calf, which is very commonly seen. This was the one found on the ridge behind the site. This was the one found behind the Savantali, behind the modern village. And one of our students who had come to the site was Miss Pallavi Gokhale, who I'm very proud to say has now gone back to archaeology and is now doing a PhD at ISER in Pune. So Pallavi said she had experience with GPS, and we asked friends of hers to come down and help us to plot these. So these really, really nice people came down from iGenesis in Bangalore with a very high precision GPS instrument and helped us to plot these on the map so that we could understand the site better. Now, this is Nalefodi over here. This is Chandore. This over here, Ranaude Pond, this 1, 2, and 3 make up what is called the group Gram Panchayat of Chandore. This is Bhatichiwadi, Mudre, Badkar Mudre, and the one over here. Now, this seemed to form a clump. This seemed to form a clump, if you want to call a pair. And this one was a complete isolate. And it still made no sense to us at all. It made no sense to us till we went back to the site of Chandore in the last season. Now, we could only go to excavate. There is a lot of luck that works in archaeology. We could only go back to Chandore to excavate as and when the university would release funds. So the university would only release funds to us after the 1st of April because it was the new year. And it would take about 8 days for the previous year's accounts to be settled. So it was only on the 9th that I could get a check, and my excavations could only start on the 10th. So all my excavations started on the 10th every year, purely because 10th of April, because of this. So we reached there in the 4th season only to find that the villagers said, "Why have you come so early?" And we said, And you see, there was an Adhik Mahina the year before, and the local yatra at Chandore was still to happen. And they said, till the yatra has happened, nobody's going to come to work. So not knowing what to do and with students at hand, I put them all to work to document the jatra of the village. And what we found was very interesting. The village had something called a kathi. Now, every village in the Konkan has a kathi. This is a long pole on top of which there is a fan of peacock feathers, and there are all kinds of streamers and flowers attached to this. And this is planted outside the temple during the jatra. And this is a mobile form of the deity or deities inside the temple. And this very often visits the entire village, and it might visit neighboring villages also with which there is a deep relationship. So, for example, Bhatichiwadi, which is over here, and Chandore have a relationship where the temple over here, which is the Shiva temple, he is the brother of the 3 goddesses who live over here. So he will come to visit them and they will come to visit him, and the jatras are normally a day apart from each other. So as we did this, what we found out was that there were 7 different kathis that came from the surrounding area and got together at Chandore to represent the 7 traditional wadis of Chandore. So 2 of them were the wadis of Nalefodi. Okay, so these are the 2 Gaivasru images. that we have found, and these are the two present day wadis. This is the old wadi and this is the new wadi which has shifted at Nalefodi. These are the Gaivasrus that we have from Chandore, from the ridge and from the Maharwada, that's Ambarwada, the ridge over here, and this thing. Ranavade Kond is a village that was only settled about 100 years ago. So it's one of these probably that would, well, belong to Ranavade Kond people. And we were very, very, so I'm sorry, this is a little bit out, this positioning over here. This positioning should be, spin should be over here. So we accounted for 6 of the Gaivasru pillars being very, very similarly located to 6 of the wadis. And then we said, but one of them is at Vadgar Mudre, and that wadi belongs to Vadgar. And they said, no. That wadi over there, Vadgar Mudre, just below that on the hill, is a wadi that belongs to Chandore. So I said, how is that possible? And they said, no, you see, the Gwalas of Chandore, the cowherds of Chandore traditionally had their wadi up in the hill because their animals' feet otherwise become soft in the rains in the land over here. So they have a wadi over there. And one kathi will come from there also to the temple. And we actually documented all of this, and we realized that there was very, very surprisingly 7 Gaivasrus, which are essentially stones of what we call donation stones. So when a donation is given, a land grant is given, a Gaivasru image is given along with the land grant. And these are very, very commonly seen. We have actually land grant stones with this image on them. The cow over here is the grant that is being given symbolically. The calf over here is the person to whom the grant is being given. And the milk that that cow is drinking is the benefit from the land that is being given. So the cow here means the land. So we were looking at 7 wadis, very important land grants being given, most probably given by some kind of a ruler. Now, there were no references to Chandore, but we knew that Chandro or Chandrapura would have been an important town during the medieval period. There was a nearby port site which had, we had found 3 Gadigals with inscriptions. One of them, which we could read, was the inscription of the Shilahara ruler Anantadeva III, dated to 1245 AD. His predecessor, Anantadeva II, had issued a very unique inscription at Sopara, in which we find the cow suckling a calf, and it's dated to 1198 AD. And V.V. Mirashi is very categoric that this is a manifestation, a physical manifestation of the land grant itself. Further explorations at Sopara have yielded the presence of a very interesting stone where there is a Gaivasru and a Gadegal, one after the other, on the same stone, showing you that the Gadegal is the punishment for anyone who goes against the land grant that has been given by the king. We also have this Gaivasru imagery in the Talale copper plates of the Kolhapur Shilahara king Ungaraditya. We have it on the Miraj copper plates of Marasimha. We have it on the inscriptional pillars of the Rashtrakutas. We have it on so many other places. And finally, we found one at the site of Goregaon, which we had linked as possibly being the location to which people were moving to and fro during this period. So what we found ultimately was, using the numismatic evidence that we found at the site and this very interesting Gaivasru pillar, we had a coin of the early Shilahara period, datable to the 12th century AD. We had coins from the site also belonging to the Bahmani period. We had coins from the site belonging to the late Maratha period. We had coins from the site belonging to the late British period. And we also had the coin belonging to the Gujarat Sultans, telling us the Ahmednagar rulers telling us about how in the 16th century, this site had been revitalized and there was a drought over here, and definitely that tank had been dug up again. Now, a lot of that data matches very well with paleoclimatic data, which tells us that there was a small little ice age going on the planet, and there was drought situation in many places in the 16th century. It was actually one of the important reasons why we see the colonizers coming out of Europe and colonizing parts of Asia and America. That again is for a different day and a different topic. What we found out was that this was a very, very important village, which had gently shifted on the landscape. And as it shifted, its temple complex also shifted. So from temple complex 1 to temple complex 2 to the present day modern temple complex, there was a lateral shifting of the village. And this is something that very commonly happens to many of the villages in this region. And this was a amazing place where we could trace the fact that there were the spatial components of the village, the social spatial components. We could trace back at least 800 years to the amazing Gaivasu images that we have found at the site. So the kind of results that came out of Chandore were not just educating the public and teaching our students and establishing the department. We did all of that and we met all those aims. We also genuinely increased the knowledge base and the knowledge database of this region, the history of this region. And for the first time, as I said, we could show why the villages in Maharashtra are built the way they are built, why these wadis are built, what these components are, and how they have changed very, very little through time and space. So this, ladies and gentlemen, gave us a very, very different understanding of rural Maharashtra and the rural Konkan in the medieval period. So subsequently, of course, this has changed the way we look at a lot of our sites. We continue to do explorations in and around the vicinity of the site. We now have more than 25 different locations at which we have hero stones, Gaivasu stones, and other such data scattered all over the place. We have temple remains also. Sometimes there is just one fragment somewhere. We don't know what else there is, but each of these have been marked very carefully at a site. We actually have a site not very far away with over 100 hero stones and Sati stones scattered on it. So the entire region was a hotbed of activity. Sadly, the traces of that activity are not visible in the sound of great monuments and great mounds, but in the monuments of the common people. So the archaeology that we were doing was essentially the archaeology of the common people. An archaeology where without inscriptions and without any great data and material, we were still able to prove so many different things. So ladies and gentlemen, that basically is in a nutshell the excavations at Chandore. And
I want to add something you forgot to mention.
Origin.
For the first 2 years, we did not have any university support, as you would remember. We charged our students to come for the excavation. That was one thing. And in the first year, our student, Vikram Rao, had donated 50,000 rupees. And that's why the rest of the money was raised from students and from our pockets. The second year was little better because Mr. Suresh Bhosle, who was the chairman of the Mahad
Manufacturers Association,
they donated us 1 lakh rupees. And it was only third year when the Vice Chancellor, the then Vice Chancellor Vedukar, visited our site, and then he appreciated it and said, yes, we will give you something. And then they gave us some 50,000, and then we also had to put in something.
We also had one of our students, Garima Chaudhary, 10,000 rupees. Yes. Then one of our batches got together some 5,000-7,000 for equipment.
Correct.
Many people helped. Many people helped.
But in the first year, their help was really very crucial. We could not have moved ahead without this help. I think Mr. Suresh Bhosle was to come in. Has he come in?
I don't know if he's here. So Mr. Bhosle was very, very kind and came down, and we were so happy to have him there. And we had an entire event at the end of the second season. The monsoons had just started, but even though it was raining, we brought a busload of our students down to the site, and we made it coincide with one of the Vice Chancellor's trips to Ratnagiri. So he stopped by on his trip, and there were a couple of Senate members who stopped by. The village was so happy that for the first time, somebody like this was coming here. Suresh ji himself had come down. There he is. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. So he himself was there also, and we put up a banner over there, I remember. And the village was so happy. They put up chai and biscuits for all of us. And we'd done a gram javan before that in the afternoon. And Mr. Bosle and the Vice Chancellor then toured the site. So we were very, very grateful for his help. If it hadn't been for the Mahad Manufacturers Association giving us that donation in the second year, it would have been impossible for us to actually make all the discoveries, because the second year was very crucial to our understanding of the site. So thank you very much, Suresh. It's so nice to see you here.
It was our pleasure to be associated with you. And it was great that, and I visited the site, I think last a few months back when I was at Masla before Corona. And I traveled along there. I went to the Chandore again to see, and what you're showing there, I could see with my own eyes again. So it is a good to be associated to the institution like you, and you are doing a great job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's because of well-wishers like you that it's possible that these things happen.
I would request Kurush, we have some time. I don't think we will have enough time for question answers, but why don't you talk about your Mandad excavation project possibilities?
So, no, we have about 10 minutes. We can take a few questions. I don't think there are many questions. Dr. Sarvamangala says, regarding the Gaivasru, we have a tradition in Mandad. Gosahara Dana, symbol of Kalasha, plow and shape is more or less similar. Sometimes there are found in clusters and sometimes individually. So there are connections between these two. Very possibly, ma'am. Very, very possibly. And Madhura Tikekar says, do the sun and the moon on the Gaivasrus symbolize something? So the sun and the moon on Gaivasrus, hero stones, Sati stones, Gadegas, basically signify perpetuity. A Chandra Surya Viraji, as long as the moon and the sun shall remain. So by putting them there, you say that for posterity, this has been given. This Danam is forever. Though, of course, it was seldom forever that it remained. Kings would change their minds very often, but this was the ethos behind it. So in a hero stone or a Sati stone, it is so that the memory of the hero or the Sati remains alive forever and ever. So therefore, the Chandra Surya Che Deul, the name that Mrs. Chitra had spoken about when she asked us to come there and see it, came from this. So there is a lot of other stuff, and there was only about an hour that we had to discuss this because there were so many other findings that we made and so much understanding that we now have of what is happening in the Konkan. So the ceramics from our Chandore excavations are all with the university as we promised.
Sanjan, he's asking about Sanjan.
Sanjan, the World Sathushree Cultural Foundation is in charge of the data. So you see, when you take permission from the ASI, you have to give a commitment as to where the material will be kept. So the material is with that organization. See, we have been subsequently excavating on our own, luckily. So in 2019, no, when did we have COVID? We had COVID in 2020. So in 2019, we took up excavations at the site of Mandad because we felt that this was an important port site. In 2018, Mr. Ramesh Gauri Raghavan and myself published a rather important paper identifying the site of Mandad as an Indo-Roman port site. We believe that it is the Indo-Roman port site of Mandagora, and that Mandad and the adjacent Kuda caves. So the Upper Braunshire, or rather the Greek version of Mandad Kuda became Mandagora is our contention. And we have shown with the help of certain devices that are found at the caves. So there is a very, very rare device which consists of a half horse, half fish. And this is a device that is usually only seen in the Mediterranean world. It is not seen anywhere on the West Coast. So this device itself tells us that there is definitely some kind of relationship between the Indo-Roman trade and the making of the caves over here. We also have a very interesting dynasty that exists over here, and perhaps we can do a lecture on this some other day. The inscriptions which were read by Ramesh and translated by him, of course, they've already read before and they're put together. And what we realized was there was a method in the madness in which grants have been given. There was a local dynasty which is very, very interesting. So The Mahabhoja dynasty ruled the region of Mandad, and we have a large number of their inscriptions and the inscriptions of their queens, kings, and princesses at the site. We also have an interesting inscription of a Mahabhoja princess married to a Maharathi king from the Bilse caves. So we know that these Mahabhojas were very well connected in the very early period, historical period in India. And we believe that the site of Mandad was uh, the site of Mandagora, a hitherto unidentified Indo-Roman port site, which is known to us from the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea and which is also known to us from Ptolemy. So in Ptolemy's geography also he talks about this site. So there are two of these sites, two of these very clear mentions of the site of Mandagora. And it is south of Chau. So we felt that this was the most logical location. We conducted a series of explorations there. And after our explorations yielded some very tantalizing clues of the early historical period, we decided to take up excavations there. We are just putting together our final report, or a preliminary report of the excavations, and the results were fascinating. So we believe that we will now not just have, made inroads into the early medieval history, but we will be moving into the early historical period also. And I'm going to be completely shameless here, ladies and gentlemen. We have done public archaeology with public money. And I am here to shamelessly ask for donations for the Institution Trust and for the excavations and for the School of Archaeology. We are planning very shortly to announce an infrastructure project to actually build the Institution Trust and to build the School of Archaeology and the School of Epigraphy, the School of Literary Studies. And we're looking at putting down foundations, physical foundations now. And we honestly request all of you to help us out in whichever way you can. So we will be very, very grateful if you help us out. We have ATG, and you can see our ATG number over there in front of you, and that's our bank account. And we will be putting this up on the Chandore group also. So you can take a screenshot of this. You can take a photograph of this using your mobile phone camera. And our IFSC code is there. Our bank account number is there. Our name of our account is there. We will be very grateful to receive any donations. So whatever you can, and we will send you an ATG certificate for the same. Please let us know. After you made the donation, drop us a message, and we will be very, very happy to, well, accept whatever you can give us and to do more work. So as I've told you, we really believe that at Institution, it is for the people that we are working, and it's only with the help of the people that we can keep. So thank you, Priyesh Shetty, for what you said. Thank you, Aslam. Yes, the sun and the moon symbols are also drawn on Warli art very much. Thank you, Indrani Pal. We will be very, very grateful. Thank you, Madhura Tidekar. Thank you very much, Aslam. So like I said, it does not matter what the size of the donation is. We are not going to be picky about it. Okay, we are going to be with folded hands. We will accept whatever comes our way, and we will be very, very grateful, and we will issue, as I told you, ATG certificates for whatever help comes our way. And
March is approaching, so
yeah, year ending is approaching. For those who would like the ATG certificate for their accounts, we are also hoping to get our foundation stone laid before that. So thanks to one of our managing trustees, we are in possession of a small plot of land, and we hope to, as I said, build the physical infrastructure of the department over there, from where we can perhaps do much more work. Thank you, Ashura. Thank you, Padma.
thank you, Kurush.
So thank you, everybody, for coming and doing this session with us, and these two sessions that we've done. And we are very grateful to all of you all for joining in. And like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure to deliver these two lectures, and Mugdha ma'am is also here. So maybe she can put in a bit of the appeal also.
Some of your students who participated in the Chandore excavations are also here. Rajesh Pujari is here.
Yeah, Rajesh is here. Charu is here.
So many artifacts at Chandore.
Swati is also here.
Oh, Swati is also here. Very good.
Charu is here.
Great.
So a lot of our old students are here. I keep saying it's always a team effort. Dr. Dandekar has been studying our ceramics. Dr. Mahesh Kalra has been looking at our coins. It was also our good friend Shailendra, Shailendra Bhandari, who also identified the coins for us in the beginning. So we're very grateful. Parth looked at the stone tools for us. So we're very, very grateful for all the different people who have been a part of this endeavor. So, none of this work ever happens in isolation. It's always a team effort. And also the students who were there with us, the villagers who were there with us, the laborers who worked with us and who kept us amused also at various times, the people of the surrounding villages who came to see what was happening and then shared with us about the various lineages of the various Jewish communities that lived there at one time. There are almost no Bene Israeli Jews in that area today. So we'll share a couple of papers in the group that we have published, and maybe that will help for those who want to read. Not compulsory.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you, and good night. Some of you would join us for the next lecture, Geology, Himalayan Landslides, Why It Is Happening. Dr. Raymond Duraiaswamy, Professor Dr. Raymond Duraiaswamy, who is heading the Department of Geology in the Savitribai Phule University, Pune. He will be giving us a talk. He's an excellent speaker. Please do join us at 7:30.
Second that completely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.